Morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar series. I'm Chloe Tetro, the coaching lead here with Ready Care for this morning's quick session. We're going to have just a brief look at the dreaded afternoon slump, why we crash, and more importantly, how to avoid it. So if you've ever noticed that wave of fatigue around 3 p.m., mid-afternoon energy crash, which is usually called the post-lunch dip, the afternoon slump. It's a very common experience. About 74% of people will experience that kind of feeling sleepy in around 3 or 4 o'clock. A phenomenon that lots of cereal bar makers have absolutely cashed in on by branding them, how to beat the afternoon slump, etc. So why does it happen? And what can you do about it? So let's have a look at that kind of myth of it being normal, first and foremost, because spoiler alert, it isn't, and what you can do basically to minimize it. So the slight drop in energy in the early afternoon is part of our body's rhythms. It can be made worse by specific behaviors, habits, and foods, which we'll look at in a second. But before I start on those, there is a normal decline of our cortisol levels in the beginning stages of the afternoon. So we think of cortisol as our stress hormone, but we need cortisol. And one of the ways and times that we need cortisol the most is when we wake up. So our natural circadian rhythm, our body's 24-hour cycle, governs our hormones, our body temperature, alertness, etc., etc. So it's not just a case of, nighttime sleepy, daytime awake. There's a lot at play into it. So in the morning time, there's a built-in wakefulness signal that happens in your body through the release of cortisol. So that goes up, your energy goes up, and it'll start to naturally decline in your day. Now, it can be felt as, a little trough, something, depending what time you get up at, between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when it typically will signal. But it really shouldn't get you to the point where your eyelids are drooping at your desk, and that you're ready to nap into your arm or anything like that. So what's more likely involved, if that's the type of thing you experience, a kind of total cognitive drop in your ability to manage tasks, think clearly, etc., etc., etc. And it's too close to your lunchtime for it to be a genuine need for food, right? You'll feel it as a crash, but you've eaten less than 2.5 hours ago, and presumably you've eaten enough to get you through your day. If you haven't, you might be hungry and experiencing it as a cognitive decline. If that's the case, we'll get onto that in a while. But a very common reason for that is a little blood sugar crash or a big blood sugar crash, depending on what you've had at lunch. So what you eat at lunch plays a massive, massive role on whether that 3 p.m., 2 p.m., 4 p.m. afternoon type slump happens. So if you've got a meal loaded in refined carbohydrates and sugars, things with white breads, pastas, rice dishes, sweets, and actually even a surplus of fruit eaten, that can cause a blood sugar spike, right after your lunch, which will be in effect for a little while. And then you'll have a steep blood sugar drop about an hour or 2 hours later, depending on your own body. So that's your classic sugar crash. So that peak followed by a crash will be basically that the peak that you're having from the blood sugars going up will trigger your body to basically level out your blood sugar levels. So it's going to flood your system with insulin to regulate it again, so that you're not operating with very high blood sugar levels, because your body wouldn't like that. That often overshoots the mark, and it leads to a big drop in your blood sugar levels. That can leave you extremely tired, abnormally tired, like you'd need a nap type of tired, or quite hungry, even though there's no real reason for you to be, because you've eaten enough to be quite stuffed, as we'd say, but you're still feeling a little bit hungry. So I'll go through that again. Peaks, troughs. Peaks happen because you're having a surplus of carbohydrates or sugar foods. Sugar foods, I'm popping into the category high fructose fruit, biscuits, sweets, the usual suspects, sugary drinks, and anything that's grain based if you're having a surplus of it. What happens is that creates the big peak in blood sugars. Your body says, no, 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 we can't have that. So it's sending off insulin. Remember, insulin's first and primary job is to balance out your blood sugar levels. So because it's seeing a huge spike, it sends out a bit too much. That means that your blood sugars bottom out. And that can be a repetitive cycle. So that can happen multiple times over somebody's day, depending on their diet. I chat to some people that be fairly high carb, right? Fairly quite a lot of either processed foods, fruit, or, quote unquote, healthy grains, but they have quite a lot of them. And they will often describe the symptoms of a low blood sugar, actually, that they can be out and about and all of a sudden they'll get the shakes, their vision will go a little bit funky and they get a bit weak and they go, oh, jeepers, I have to eat something because I feel like I'm going to collapse. And you say, oh, well, you know, people talk about overeating sugars, but obviously I can't be one of these people because I'd have symptoms of low blood sugars quite a bit. So, without getting a blood test, if I was to guess, maybe actually I'm on the lower side. Not so, not always so, and often not so. It can be because of a bounce back effect. So if you're getting that sleepiness, check what you're having in your food. Is it a surplus of the foods I've mentioned? Are you better off having something like high fat, high good fats, high protein, good nutrients with a little bit of carbohydrates if you fancy them for taste? I'm not saying to get rid of them altogether. What you're looking to do is avoid that kind of food coma. Right, most people understand what I mean by that. Food coma type of thing is really getting in the way of your energy, your output, your mood, usually, because when people are experiencing a crash, they are not in a good form most of the time. And what that can do is it can basically keep you on that merry-go-round of getting a crash, wanting something sweet, wanting something like crisps, fruit, even fruit, God love it. We have this idea that it's be all end all, it's healthy, it's natural. And yes, that's true, but it depends on the amounts that we're having. Basically, anything that's going to convert to sugar quite quickly is going to keep you on that merry-go-round. And the side effects of that, because that happening once in a while, who cares? Not the end of the world. If you're caught on the merry-go-round, what has a tendency to happen is you'll have the secondary effects of having these types of foods, craving these types of foods, come into the picture a little bit. So it's going to disturb your circadian rhythm. You're going to have difficulty sleeping. You're probably going to get more stressed, more anxious, have some difficulties with your digestion, difficulties keeping weight off, because these types of foods in accumulation will have you put on weight. And when people see their weight go up, oftentimes they'll think, oh, maybe it's a portion control. I should have a lesser amount of food. And what has a tendency to happen when that happens is your food and your calories are basically your energy. So back to the scenario I mentioned a while ago, where you say, jeepers, I'm putting on a bit of weight, I better eat a smaller portion at my lunch. But look, I'll have fruit because I'm only having a small bit of that. And I won't bother now having loads of chicken. I won't bother having, cheeses, avocados, anything that is high in fat, because there's still an idea that it's the fat causing the fats, not the sugars. And what I'll do is I'll have a very small portion, and then it might be rice, it might be pasta, but I'm having a small amount. So the scenario is you're under eating, but you're still getting blood sugars and spikes and crashes. So you're under eating, you're hungry, you're tired, you're cranky, you're still going for the bits and bobs here and there. The weight is maybe not coming off in the way that you want it to, and you're feeling exhausted. Scenario we're looking to avoid. Right. So another way that the crashes happen is eating and digestion also shift our hormonal balance in ways that can sometimes encourage sleepiness. So after a meal, the body releases signals to reduce alertness, increase feelings of relaxation. So for example, if you're consuming those high levels of carbohydrates, that will raise your serotonin, which is a brain chemical that promotes sleepiness, calm, all the good stuff, and even nudge up your melatonin, the hormone that makes us sleepy. So meanwhile, your alertness producing hypocrine levels start to dip. And that's all very normal. Now, if this is happening over and over and over and over and over through your habits that are promoting, ups and downs of your blood sugars, etc., if you're under chronic stress, there's an added twist, which is your adrenal system might be overworked from pumping out your cortisol every day. And then that crash hits you harder. So even if you're having a fairly low carb, high protein, good veg, good fats type of lunches, if you're chronically stressed, that very normal hormonal fluctuation is going to hit you an awful lot harder. You're going to get a big old dip in your energy levels and you're going to feel a lot more tired. And that is usually a signal to start to look after your stress day by day. We have a tendency to put ourselves last on the list of priorities where stress is concerned and think, there's people out there that have it much worse. I should be able to X, Y, Z. But if the reality is that you're struggling, your stress levels are through the roof, and you're finding yourself pretty exhausted all the time, your day-to-day experience really is calling for just a closer look to see, are there other ways I can look after my stress levels here? Because my day in, day out is suffering a bit. And the other little factor I'll touch on briefly is dehydration and sedentary habits. So mild dehydration can be a fairly sneaky cause of daytime fatigue if you're not drinking enough water. Your energy is going to bottom out pretty quickly, particularly by the afternoon. Is tea and coffee a water source? Debate is out on it. So technically, yes, you're having, let's say, people say we should have 8 cups of water a day, and you have 8 cups of water heated with a tea bag in it. Are you getting hydrated? So you are and you aren't. Right? What you'll notice is if you're having lots of tea and coffee, they're diuretics. So you have a tendency to pee quite a lot more than you usually would. So it's offsetting where you'd usually just have your usual hydration from water, from coconut water, any other types of non-tea and coffee hydration. You might have herbal teas. Herbal teas are fine. Black tea and coffee have a natural diuretic, so sometimes you aren't really getting as much water as you think that you are. So when you're dehydrated, you can't really think very well. Your cognitive abilities are going to dip ever so slightly. You're more prone to feeling lethargic. It's going to reduce your blood circulation, your oxygenation. So all of these are things to think about. The most common one, lads, to be honest with you, is the food one. That's, food coma 101. What do people have a tendency to want to go for? They'll want something sweet. They'll want a cereal bar. They'll want chocolate, crisps, fruit, whatever it is. If you're seeing that dip in energy coupled with the wanting of these types of foods that I mentioned, that's more, I would say, well over 70% of afternoon slumps are caused by a blood sugar crash from slightly overeating carbohydrate-based foods in your first part of the day, or absolutely pounding the coffees in the morning time and getting a bounce back effect from that. So ways to remedy it would be the inverse of that. So limiting your quick sugars and refined carbs at lunch, fill up on proteins, fill up on good fats, fill up on vegetables, anything like that. Any of these types of foods are basically going to help your energy. They're going to help your metabolism. They're going to help if you're weight conscious, cholesterol conscious, blood pressure conscious, all of these different things. They're only going to help. High protein is not a way that people put on weight. It's going to help to regulate all of that. But more importantly, proteins and fats don't give you the spikes and crashes because they have very, very little sugar response. So what you'll get is a little blip on your blood sugar radar. There's no need for your body to start pumping out all that insulin, which is overshooting the mark and making you exhausted. So a well-balanced high protein. So that's going to be eggs, meats, fish, tofu, tempeh if you're a vegetarian, um, nuts, beans, seeds, all of these type of things. Having a diet high in those is going to safeguard. Having dairy products that are full fat, they'll also have protein in them. So cottage cheese is absolutely brilliant. It's only a very small amount of it. You're getting loads of proteins and good fats. That's going to keep you fuller for longer. It's going to keep your brain taking over longer, and it's going to avoid crashes altogether. And if you're a big fruit eater, you don't have to give up the old fruits, but you can switch over to something like berries. Berries are packing a huge nutritional punch while packing a very low sugar punch. They're some of the best fruit out there. Having one piece of fruit a day, it's like a banana, like a pear, apple, grapes. They are much higher in sugars, but if you're having one once in a while, not the end of the world. Let's be honest here. This is more if you find yourself picking because you're getting crashes on fruit several times per day. So taking a movement break is good as well, because you want to get the blood flow and oxygenation going. So getting up, going for a 5 to 10 minute brisk walk. If you need to eat, going for your protein foods, hydrating before you reach for another coffee. Check if you're actually thirsty. If you're not fond of the taste of water, which I always think is hilarious because it doesn't taste like anything, but lots of people will say that they just don't like how water tastes, or doesn't taste, I suppose, as the case may be. You can pop something into it, you know. That sounds way more dubious than I meant it to. You can flavor it, you know, if you're having a no sugar squash, happy days. If you want to pop loads of fruit, mint, whatever it may be, it flavor it to your heart's content. As long as you're getting some water into your system, that's all that matters. It's kind of net positive. If you're having a little bit of something in the water to have you drinking it, who cares, really? You know, it's better to have something like that than not have it at all. So stay hydrated, get foods that would be high proteins, good fats. Don't skimp on your portion size if it is high proteins and high fats, because it's going to help you, you know, net positive. You're going to be going for less foods that metabolically screw you up, like crisps, sugars, chocolates, this, that, and the other. Even if you're having a small amount of those, if you haven't eaten a proper lunch and you're trying to reduce your portion sizes to the point that you know you're going to be hungry, you're going to end up picking on things. And offices are just rife rife with slow deaths. It's always somebody's birthday. Somebody's always very kind-hearted and brings in things for people. And it's very difficult to constantly have I mean, I'm doing this type of work a long time. And if I'm having, you know, a dip in my energy and I know that there's biscuits and things like that, I have to fight myself really, 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 really hard to not convince myself with FBI, CIA levels of negotiations that I'm actually fine just to have a few of them. So making sure that you've eaten an adequate amount of foods that won't give you the bounce back effect, staying hydrated and minding your coffee intake. Like if you're having a few coffees, absolutely grand. I'm meaning here, if you're really pounding into the coffees all day long and you find yourself having a crash afterwards, that's pretty normal. And fresh air, which I forgot to talk about before I wrap up. Fresh air is going to be a huge thing, because more often than not, you're going to be in an environment with recycled air, lots of people around. If the temperature's a little bit too warm as well, it will naturally induce people to feel a little bit sleepy. So getting a little bit of fresh air in there, right? I hope you found that helpful. Keeping it fairly brief today, because essentially it's going to be a lot of the same type of information. Comment in here, Darth Carnivore, blood sugar roller coasters have no wait time or height requirements. Absolutely. No fun to ride, but many people ride it out almost every waking hour. Chalk it down. And like, without me kind of flogging a dead horse with it, it's the biggest culprit. It's the biggest culprit. The things like the coffees, the things like the environment, the things like not moving. Yes, up to a point, a little bit, but really it's going to be, for most people, it's the carbohydrate ups and downs of blood sugars. And what I find, Darth Carnivore, I shall name you by that name. What I find, when people start a low carb protocol, the first thing, actually, there's two things they notice. They notice their appetite going down within a couple of days, Very, very normal. Appetite will start to drop to a normal level where they're not reaching for snacks and things all day long. And the other thing is, you would think their energy would go lower, but actually, most people will say, I could be tipping away all day long and I'm not having to sit down on the couch. I'm not having to go for a mid afternoon nap. Um, there, the proof's in the pudding where these things are concerned, that these are the markers. If so many people report that their energy levels get better from eliminating or bringing down their levels of refined sugars, carb, fruit, and all of that, that in itself is a huge signaler. And I'd say, for those that aren't sure, that are saying, jeepers, there she goes again on her low carb soapbox, try it. Try it. Be the investigator of your own experience. If you want to try it out for 10 days, right? A week, 10 days, I'd say 10 days. Give yourself 10 days and switch out your lunches to have less grains, less sugars, anything less porridge, bread, potatoes, pastas, rice, bananas. Try having less of those for a week. Try having more proteins for that week and see how you feel by the end of the week. And if somebody wants to try that for the week and get on to our next chat and tell me that they feel way more tired, I will apologize to you. But I know from experience, working with hundreds, and I would say thousands of people over the last number of years, that the inverse is going to be so. So the mid-afternoon slump is not something that has to happen. And if it's affecting you, your work, your energy, your mood, your co-worker's mood by default of being around you, try it out for the week, see how you feel, and report back. Thanks for those that tuned in, and we will chat to you next week. Bye now.